Ryan, what's on your radar?
So now that the war in Afghanistan has finally been declared over, it's long past time for the media and the U.S. foreign policy community to take a serious look at everything that went wrong. Republicans are already calling for committee hearings on what they say are the president's failure to lead an orderly exit from the failure. But the inquiry needs to be much deeper than that. Here's Congressman Ro Khanna in an interview this week on this program.
Is there any sort of method for bringing accountability? Like carting in guys like Bush and even Obama and the people that worked in their administrations to have some accountability? Is there any mechanism for we, the American people, to get accountability for this wasteful 20-year war?
Kim, absolutely. Now, I think it's hard to have a former president come in, but short of that, we can have a lot of the administration officials who helped make those decisions and who executed those decisions.
There's no shortage of crimes to investigate, and that puts the onus not just on the committees, but on Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines. When Haines was a senior intelligence official at the Obama administration, she was regularly held up as the legal eagle who made sure the drone program and its kill list was well regulated and not carrying out war crimes. Now, there were a lot of people who argued that the whole concept was a moral atrocity and that the presence of Haines was an effort to put some sort of humanitarian gloss on a morally indefensible project. Well, now Haines has a chance to prove her doubters wrong by actually holding U.S. war criminals accountable for the crimes they've committed. When she was nominated, national security types came out of the woodwork to assure the public she was the one who'd kept everybody in line. At her confirmation hearing in January, she promised she'd do everything she could to restore trust in the intelligence services.
But perhaps the greatest challenge to be faced by the next D&I, internally and externally, including with the workforce, this committee, and the public, is building the trust and confidence necessary to protect the American people. To be effective, the D&I must never shy away from speaking truth to power, even especially when doing so may be inconvenient or difficult.
Back in December at The Intercept, reporter Andrew Quilty documented a shocking string of massacres carried out by CIA-run death squads in Afghanistan. Since the U.S. was still occupying Afghanistan then, the U.S. media had no interest in the story, and it got roughly zero coverage on cable. One of the stories Quilty told has stuck with me since. And it's of two boys who went to school barefoot in the morning because their father, Mahmoud, hadn't returned from Kabul yet with their new shoes. Quilty wrote that their mother had since taken to rituals. Quote, "On Thursday evenings," Mahmoud says, "she lays the two silk turbans her sons wore at the madrasa on pillows and tells the room, 'Today, my sons are coming home.' And every morning and every night, she cleans the shoes Mahmoud brought home from Kabul and lays them out for her boys. Those boys will never wear those shoes." And perhaps it sticks with me because it reminds me of a short story attributed to Ernest Hemingway that reads in full, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." Victims told Quilty they heard the sound of American voices outside the classrooms. So who do those voices belong to? Their identities are a secret to the public, but they shouldn't be secret to Avril Haines, who could ask a couple questions and get to the bottom of it quickly. My colleague at The Intercept, Murtaza Hussain, recently reached out to the CIA to find out whether the agency, under the direction of the new ethically minded leadership, was investigating the war crimes The Intercept had uncovered. A spokesperson declined to comment, but referred him to a response the agency had given to a Human Rights Watch report that had also alleged atrocities had been committed. I want to read a full passage, because you have to hear it and see it to believe this is a real CIA response. They said, quote, "For many years, well-intentioned journalists and non-governmental organizations have published accounts of alleged abuses by Afghan forces like those contained in the Human Rights Watch report. The U.S. government routinely reviews such serious allegations to determine their validity. Although Human Rights Watch did not provide the CIA time to study the particular allegations in this report, without confirming or denying any particular role in government of Afghanistan counterterrorism operations, we can say with some confidence that many, if not all, of the claims leveled against Afghan forces are likely false or exaggerated. Past in-depth reviews of similar allegations have shown this to be the case." In other words, we haven't looked into these allegations, but we're confident they're false. The CIA sounds like a parent who's just been told his kid was bullying other kids at school. My beautiful boy? He would never. The CIA issued that response to a separate report in October 2019, more than a year before The Intercept exposed a new set of atrocities. That they would refer to a past denial of war crimes and just tell a reporter to reuse that denial for new war crimes shows just how immune they must feel from any accountability. If Avril Haines has the moral integrity her defenders claim, she needs to bring a hammer down. And with the war over, there's no excuse not to. If she doesn't, she just proves the cynics right. So, Alyssa, do you think there's any shot that we're going to see some accountability, if not for the most egregious strategic errors, at least for some of the most serious war crimes that were committed?
I'm not confident we're going to. I think that you made a very good point that we're going to see some kind of tinkering around the edges of oversight hearings of the final stretch of our time in Afghanistan. What I don't expect to see is after 20 years, $3 trillion, 2,400 American lives lost, how Afghanistan was able to crumble days after pulling out U.S. forces. One quick note I want to make, because I think these are really valid and important points that you're making, and there's a lot of questions both about the IC's role in Afghanistan and also even the use of mercenaries at points within the war. I do know that the U.S. military goes to the greatest degrees possible to avoid civilian casualties, to follow the law of armed conflict, but there's oftentimes, war is hell, and there's times that we bring in these rogue actors that aren't governed by some of the same moral requirements and ethical requirements that our armed forces try to hold themselves to. And there are cases of this throughout our time in Afghanistan, and it's certainly something that should be investigated, along with just the utter failure that we saw after 20 years.
Yeah, I don't see that there's going to be any real accountability, unfortunately, Ryan. I don't see anybody raising their hand saying, I'm responsible, I take the fall, or my guys did it. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the boss, right? So even if there are investigations and they find that people were responsible for certain things, X, Y, Z, at the end of the day, it should be the responsibility of the person in charge. And no one at that level wants to take that sort of responsibility.
Right.
So I don't see anything. And then also to Alyssa's point, 20 years, and then, nobody wants to take responsibility for things today that have been going on for decades.
Right, and this is all the more important because, Kim, as you were talking about earlier on the program, the war isn't exactly ending. What it's doing is it's shifting and evolving into a new type of global war. And if it's going to involve our proxies that are kind of CIA trained and run, and if we have a history of running these proxies just recently that are committing mass atrocities, massacring children in schools, it's all the more important that if that's the direction that the intelligence community wants to take this global war, that they're doing it, that they look into what crimes they've committed in the recent past. And Haines has another credibility problem that she needs to overcome. If you remember, she was the one who was in charge over in the intelligence world when the CIA investigated itself for spying on the Senate. Spying on Senate staffers. There was even an Adam Driver movie made about it, and they concluded that they had done nothing wrong. They investigated themselves and cleared themselves. So far that is a stain on Avril Haines' record. If she doesn't want another one, she really has to look into this. But we will have more Rising for everybody right after this.